So I've already shared the write-up you sent me and your intro, and you can just briefly start by, because I don't want to introduce you. That's going to be very embarrassing since what we've been through in American university. So you can just explain, how you got into writing and how you got into journalism and by way of self-introduction.
Sure.
Then, yeah, we move on.
I went to the University of Florida here in the United States to study English, and I liked writing, but it was my freshman year in college. I met some reporters for the local newspaper, and they impressed me. And they asked me what I wanted to do, and I said, "Well, I'd like to write." And then they said, "Well, do you want to write and get paid?" I said, "Yeah, that'd be good to get paid." And they said, "Well, you ought to think about journalism." I tried out for the school newspaper and wrote a couple of stories. And the first time they published one of my stories, then I was hooked. I went to class one day, and there was somebody I didn't know, a student. A student was reading my story in the school paper. And I don't know if you guys have had that experience, but that was pretty cool. And I've been, that was the end of it. I changed my major to journalism. And after I graduated, I wrote for newspapers and magazines and wire services, mostly in the southern part of the United States, for 15 years. I did. I was eventually a bureau chief, a state legislative, state house reporter, and a weekly political columnist. And that's what I was doing that's what I was doing during the day. And at night, I was writing fiction. I was being a reporter during the day, and at night I was just sort of making it up. I was playing around. But one of my stories, short stories, got published. And I thought that was just really cool. So I jumped to the dark side. I quit my newspaper work and worked full-time on my fiction, and went back to school and got my master's in fiction writing. And then I got a PhD in American literature. I've been editor of 2 literary magazines. That's what I thought I was going to do. I wasn't sure I was going to go into teaching. I just wanted to write. But a local university had asked me to be a guest lecturer, and it was kind of fun. So I started thinking maybe a teacher's life ain't that bad. Newspaper work is not necessarily a young person's game, but I was a front page reporter. The big stories, I had to go, and I covered the big stories. And I got married, and I had children, and I started missing my children because I was away on assignment. And some of you may relate to that. And I decided I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to be an editor-in-chief. I didn't want to be in a Washington bureau. I wanted to watch my children grow up. So that's the main reason I quit journalism. But then I got hired here at Elmhurst University, and I've been here ever since, except for one year when I hung out at American University in Bulgaria, which was another strange trip. That's how I got here. What's the deal here? Are all of you writing for local publications, or what's the goal with this class? Are you guys? What do you want to do?
Guys, you can answer.
Write for a local publication one day, maybe, or maybe something better than that.
Right. I didn't know if you guys were interested in print, digital, or broadcasting.
Digital.
Which one? Digital. It is the way it is. The college newspaper that I founded here in Chicago no longer prints. They're all online now. So it's been a pivot for all of us in journalism to figure out how we cover stories from a distance. If we can't be there, can we still cover it? And Zoom and other technology has allowed us to continue working from home or wherever. So we're all digital journalists now, I think, Dev. I was asked to talk to you about creative nonfiction, and my assumption is that you guys do know how to write a story, and in nonfiction and journalism. But what's going on with your feature writing? Do you guys ever work with first person features?
Yes, we've started this term.
Right. What is in your area, Dev? What is the percentage of feature stories that are in first person? Is it the majority or not?
It's minority. It's very. It's in the minority, pretty much minority.
It's becoming very popular here.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not a fan of first person journalism. It's unless it's literary, and that's what I do, and that's what I'm going to talk to you guys about. A straight up regular feature story in which you write it in first person. I don't understand why I have to hear about you. You see, I don't know why the first person journalist is using the word I when I never makes an appearance or does anything. So what I'm talking about today is something a little bit different, but it is a tool for you who are interested in what we call literary journalism. It's not the same as New Age, but you tell a story, but you have two subjects. You guys know, in first person, not much is added, but the subject of the story is always the focus. If you write a regular feature story, you're focused on a subject. A first person feature story, you're focused on a subject. In creative nonfiction, you also are focused on a subject, but the writer takes the presence. The writer comes up to the front and has a role in the story. It tells kind of two stories: the subject of the article, but also something bigger that we cannot define without saying something about the human condition. Writers write about humans and about humanity and who and what we are as a people. We can still cover a subject, do a profile of somebody or some issue or event. But if you want to get creative, you got to be okay with coming up to the front. Now, what I mean is when you read a regular news story, often the writer is invisible. And sometimes that is the goal, is to be invisible. Just the facts, what happened, keeping the focus on the story itself. But something changes if you allow yourself to make a presence. This is the first line of a story I wrote about remembering the time I covered a state execution. I don't know how it is there, but here we still have executions, capital punishment, and I was asked to cover one for a chain of newspapers down south, and I did. And when I did cover it, I wrote a breaking news story that day, that afternoon, I wrote a long form feature story all about the crime and the victims. I was being a good reporter, but I was recognizing that this was a unique opportunity. You know that um, covering an execution is not fun. It was necessary to understand and make sure and keep the state uh, viable, making sure the state wasn't doing anything, executing wrongly convicted people, that kind of thing. I was just a witness. And anyway, I wrote that story over 20 years ago, but then move forward 20 years, National Public Radio asked me to do a piece about executions. I hadn't thought about it or hadn't done any execution. I hadn't gone to any. It was only one in my entire life. But National Public Radio was interested in a national debate on whether or not we should have public executions. People wanted to go watch criminals die, criminals who had hurt them, criminals who had hurt their town or their community. There was a bit of an outcry for a while that people wanted to go watch. And so public radio was not sure what position they should take, and they asked a few writers to comment, and I did. And most of the commentary was about for or against execution, about witnessing execution. I didn't take that tactic. I wrote about remembering the time I went to an execution. And the first sentence is this: years ago, or was it just the other day, I watched some men in uniform strap another man into a chair, attach wires to his body, and then send so much electricity through him that the smell of his burning skin drifted beneath his hooded mask and through the plexiglass that divided him from me. That was the first sentence. And you hear it, and it's hard. I do know it's hard not to want to hear the next sentence. You see, I set it up as a narrative, a story. I told a story about me watching the execution, and the readers would find it kind of tricky because they were going to go into it thinking they're going to hear a story about me going to an execution, when in truth, they're reading a story about execution. I'm just kind of the narrator. I guess that might be the difference, guys, to think about creative nonfiction. You're a reporter, always. You got to have the facts. It's got to be true. But at some point, if you want to, you can become a narrator. And that's a different role for the reporter. It's highly opinionated, and we are just telling readers about themselves, and sometimes it's uncomfortable. But that's the first line I did on that piece, and it ran as the lead story that night on NPR. Everybody liked it. I got letters. It was strange, but you guys, I will tell you that there are some rules. If you're interested in creative nonfiction, there are 5 elements, characteristics that you have to. Now you got to decide if you're working on a story, how you're going to do it. If it's going to be a straight piece of journalism, objective reporting, a feature story, are you going to bring in color and details, or you can do this. You can be creative, and to do that, there are 5 rules. What you have to have. The first one is that there are 2 subjects. You're doing a story about X, whatever X is. That's the focus. And the reader is reading the story about X because you're writing it. But as the story goes, another subject comes in, something bigger, sometimes not really clear what the story is about. And you're doing it with sensory creative details like a narrator writing fiction. It's like the events of the surface play out, and it's like this. Here's a story. I woke up yesterday hungry, like I did this morning, and so I went to the store and got some food and came home and ate it. It was good. Yum, yum. Now, that's a stupid story, and it's real quick, and it's all about me getting up and, having conflict because I'm hungry, and I got to go get some food, and I go get the food. And that's the only subject. If I were to make that creative, I'm going to go off on the side. I'm still going to write about going to the store and getting food and eating it, but I might tell you about what happened when I was 3 years old, and my mother left me on the porch. I was lost and I was hungry. I might tell you a lot of different things, but at the end of the story, we're gonna learn something about hunger and about people being hungry, and what a problem that is in the world. You see, there's two subjects. You're kind of adding depth to it. The second rule is that the piece is timeless to the reader, but not the writer. When you do a piece of creative nonfiction, it's important to you right now that you do this story. For the reader, a story about hunger, yeah, I can read that today, or I can read that tomorrow, I can read that next week. I can set it aside, just set it on the table and come back and read it someday. A story about hunger. But you, as the writer, you have to write it today for some reason. Now, maybe you don't really have to write it today, but the story should reflect that you do. And so it's not timeless for you. There's a reason you have to write it. And the reader is going to learn that as they go. It's I'm probably not explaining it well. It'd be like this. The way to find a good piece for creative nonfiction is to pay attention to the trends in your area, in your country, in your part of the world. Trends that bother you. Things are going on, and you're noticing them. You're thinking about them. You're talking about them with your friends, and now you want to, for some reason, you want to tell me what you think about those trends. You want to put some light on those trends, and for some reason, it's important to you that you do that. That is the basis for a good piece of creative nonfiction. There's something that you want to tell people about something important, and you decide what important that is. You can find good pieces and topics on the front page, headlines, trends, but it has to be kind of timeless for the reader. Now, rule number 3 is that it's narrative. It is a story. You got to think about movement along the line. Somebody in your story, mostly you have to be doing something. Going to the store, getting some food, having breakfast. There is some movement. For my piece, I'm sitting in a state prison watching an execution, and I narrate the action. Something is happening. Always, and no matter what you're doing, the narrative is got to be there, because the reader thinks that's the story, is the narrative, but it's what's beneath it becomes the real subject. Rule 4, it contains a sense of reflection by you. At some point in a creative nonfiction piece, you got to think about stuff. Maybe the story is you going to the store, getting food, and going home and eating. But at some point, you have to think about things, important things, somehow related to the subject, hunger, execution, whatever it might be. The story moves along a plot line. And then this reflection by the author. And the rule 5 is that it shows a serious attention to the craft of writing. This is not a quick one draft story. There are several drafts involved. You got to write the story, get all the facts down. You got to be a reporter, get all the facts, and then write all the facts. But what word do you use in that one sentence? On the what I call the magic draft is when you got the story down, but then you revise it word by word by word, because that one word may not be the right word. You want to add this word, make this change. There's something you're trying to do. You have to pay serious attention to the craft of writing. You pull all that together, and you're going to have something, a story, and it might work. Depends on what publication you're working at. I asked Deb to get everybody to read this Red Sky in the Morning. Did everybody read that? What do you guys think about it?
I feel like I was a little confused about where the story was going. I mean, it started off where she's describing seeing this, she's sitting in this bus and she watches this couple, and then after that it goes into a whole different trajectory that I didn't quite understand. Like, I didn't understand how it was relevant to the story, or like to this beginning of the story.
That going off is, I told you, there are two subjects. You have the story of her going on the bus, seeing that woman kissing that boy, and that interaction. That's plot one. And plot two is something about stories. I like this piece because this piece is about writing stories and remembering stories. And which stories do we choose to remember? And as writers, which ones we decide to share with others. And this is I like Red Sky in the Morning. I gave it to you in part because it was about 4 years ago. This story won a contest here in the United States for creative nonfiction. This story took first place for creative nonfiction. And you see, it is a story about memoirs and about autobiographical writing and what we are doing with that. That's the journalism focus. That's the journalist story. But we have, you absolutely feel the writer. She is telling you how she feels about things. Now, I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but I do want to point out word choices. You got to think about, when we talk about color writing, when you want to add color to your story, it's not just using colorful words, it's using the exact word that you need. Excuse me. Now, if you look at Red Sky in the Morning, I hope you notice some of these words. We start out with your another life. I woke to look out the smeared window of a Greyhound bus. Now, you guys go ahead. Think about a window in a public transportation. Now, look out that window, but tell me about the glass. Is it smeared? Or what word would you use to describe that glass? This is what I mean by details. You got to pay attention. Now, we get the stout middle-aged woman, godlike young man. But did you notice all the words she uses in the first three paragraphs to tell you how big this woman is without telling you how big she is? See, now she might be obese. And maybe the writer doesn't want to insult anybody, but how do you get that across to the reader that she's a really large woman? It's your word choice. She, stolid, matronly, received the adoration of the simple grandeur, like a socialist realist statue of a woman taking up sheaves of wheat. Now, when you read that line, you got to think, like, what the hell is she writing about? Right? What the hell is that? A socialist realist statue of a woman taking up sheaves of wheat. That's a creative observation about what she looks like. And he goes on. We got, she lumbered down the aisle, lurching forward, two bulging sacks. She heaved herself into the chair, hoisting. You get all those word choices together, and you get the sense of her being really large, and without the writer saying that she was obese. You got the impression that she is. Word choices change everything. And then it goes on. She slumped back in her seat. She was a farm woman. And then, as in the fourth paragraph, does the narrator make a presence? The narrator says, I was a university student. That's the first time we hear about her. And now we're going on, and we hear, I was living in a tattered corner of a romantic ideal. A proud sigh, she minds the truth. So this woman, Patricia, saw a large woman kissing on a real pretty young boy, young man, and she might have misinterpreted, that they were the woman was the mother. There was such big age difference. So in other words, it was an unusual, at least to our writer, an unusual romance to witness. And she gets wrong about things, and then we find out that they're married and very happy. And the large woman says, "Hey, I could tell you stories without telling them. I could tell you stories about what it's like to be a big, large farm woman married to a real pretty young man. I can tell you stories." And then you see that is what Patricia was writing about. She's not writing about being on that bus. She's not writing about kissing or odd romance. She's writing about stories. I could tell you stories. And so that's when the subject changes. There are two subjects running throughout. The trip on the bus, you see she's on the bus right from the first paragraph. She's on the bus in the last paragraph. But in between, she's giving you facts. She's telling you what's going on with autobiographical writing, how the creative nonfiction is becoming very popular in American society. You see, two subjects. I like that piece. There's things you can do with that. Like I said, she took first place in a contest, so I thought it was pretty good. It's like I said, it's hang on, you guys excuse me, I'm still waking up, Deb. Hey, I'll tell you what we'll do. I can play a little bit if you guys want to play. Why don't you guys get out some paper or a computer or word processing? I'm going to give you an exercise. I'm going to show you a little bit about how to bring color into your writing. But you're going to have to work with me. So get out some paper or open up a document, if you don't mind. Can I do this, Dev?
Sure thing.
It's an exercise in sensory detail. And what I mean by sensors is, how do things feel? How do they taste? What do they smell like? A lot of times those kind of details are irrelevant in a journalism story because we're just telling the readers what happened yesterday. We don't really bring much color into it. Now, when I say color, and Deb will tell you, it's not just colors, what's blue or red. Color writing is you're adding sensory details. And what the kicker is, your reader will get it. That you're trying to convey something, like the word choices Patricia Hampel used when the stout, matronly, godlike, lumber, she lurched, she heaved, she was bulky. Word choices are important if you're trying to convey a particular mood or attitude. So let's play with sensory details. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to think about a room that you know really well. And put it in your head. It's your bedroom, it's your classroom, it's a room that you go to a lot, and you know it well. In that room is an inanimate object. Here's my mouse. Here are some glasses. It's something you can put in your hand that's not alive. It's not a hamster, it's not a dog, it's not a cat. There is something in that room. Here's my object, a stapler. Just think about it. This is just an exercise. This is a silly piece that you'll never use anywhere, but the technique you might. So think about the room that you know and an object. You are sitting in that room. So right now, you got to think about what you're sitting on. Are you sitting on a chair? Are you sitting on a bed? Are you sitting on the floor? You're sitting, and across the room is a table with your object, something you want is sitting on that table. All this is, we're making that part, all that part up. Are we there? Has everybody got a room and an object? All right, I'm gonna give you some prompts, and I want you to write them exactly the way I say it. We're in first person, and it would be this. The first sentence should say this: I am sitting blank. I'm sitting on a chair. I'm sitting on a bed. I'm on a hammock in blank room, in my living room, in my bedroom, or my kitchen. I'm sitting on a chair in my kitchen. You decide what to fill in the blanks with, but go ahead and write that down. This is where, since most of you don't have your cameras on, I don't see anybody writing. I don't know what you're doing. Thank you. I'm just saying. I hope you're playing. We're going to play. So that's the first line. I'm sitting on blank in a blank room. Are we all good with that? Now, I want you to reach down and rub your hand on whatever it is you're sitting on. I reach down and rub my hand on blank, on my chair, on my bed. Write that down. That's your second sentence. I reach down and rub my hand on blank. This is the chair, whatever you're sitting on. Sentence 3. It feels blank. Now you got to think a minute. I want you to think about that blank. You're rubbing your chair or your bed or wherever you're sitting. You got your hand on it. Now, you have to imagine it, but what does that feel like? Now, you're going to be real tempted to go to the surface and say, it was soft. I rubbed my hand on it, it was soft, it was hard. No, those are too easy. Don't use the word soft, don't use the word hard, but describe what that chair feels like. Go ahead, do it now. I rub my hand on it, it feels blank. What does it feel like? Can you tell me it's soft without using the word soft? I'm just letting you have time. Now, the next sentence, if you're ready. I stand up and walk over to my, for me, my stapler on the table. But go ahead and you tell me what you're writing, you're walking over to get. There's something, remember, there's an object in that room. It's on a table. Now, stand up and walk over to the object. And that's how you tell the reader what this is. I stand up and walk over to the stapler. Go ahead and write that line. Now it's going to get a little strange because I walk over to my stapler, but sitting next to my stapler is my coffee mug. So I got my stapler and my coffee mug, and they're sitting next to each other. Now, the stapler is the subject. This is what I'm writing about. That's the point. I'm walking over to get the stapler. That's what I'm writing about. But I get distracted by this other object, the secondary object. And now you got to think about it. The room you're in, you walk over to get your object. Now you got to picture something else sitting next to it to get this next line. And here it is. It, my stapler, is sitting next to blank. Fill in that blank. For me, my stapler is sitting next to my coffee. Now the sentence keeps going now. Because now I'm writing about my coffee because my stapler is sitting next to my coffee cup, which reminds me of blank. Now you got to think about this blank. Now I can say it's sitting next to my coffee cup, which reminds me that I'm thirsty and I want some more coffee. Or it's something completely different. I don't know what's sitting there, but when you look down at that second object, what does it remind you of? Fill in the blank. Does everybody understand that one? I'll let you take your time. Now you're gonna be able to come back and revise all of this if you were actually doing this. If this was a real story, you guys know how much time you have to revise. I'm just trying to get you to get a first draft down. All right, now I pick up my stapler. Remember, you had the previous sentence was about the coffee cup, but you remember I walked over the table to get the stapler. So I pick up my stapler. Now the story gets weird, guys. I pick up my stapler and I throw it in the air. Write that down. I pick up my blank and throw it into the air. Write that down. But the next sentence, now describe how you catch it. Describe how you catch it because, oops, I almost missed it. I was clumsy. I was smooth. I'm an athlete. I am a super sharp guy when it comes to catching staplers. I don't know. Go ahead. Imagine throwing that object in the air and catching it. How hard was it to catch? How heavy is it? Did it spin around? Did it come down and stab you when you caught it? Go ahead. Take a few minutes. Describe catching the object. Now, you can come back and fix that sentence if you need to add to it, but here's the deal. I threw my stapler and caught it, remember? Now the next sentence, I press my stapler up against my ear. Whatever your object it is, I want you to hold it up against your ear. Like a shell, people, and there's a sound. It reminds me that I throw it in the air, I press my object against my ear, and I hear blank. What is that sound? Now, don't say, I hear nothing. I hear silence. It may be nothing. It may be silence. But what do you hear when you put that object up your ear? You're just making this up, folks. Just making it up. But imagine, like if you put a cup over your ear or your hand, there's a bit of a roar. The sea can be in a seashell. It's some sound when you hold that object up against your ear. I hear blank. Now, for some reason, I bring it close to my eye, as close as I can. It looks like blank. Put it up against your eye, as close as you can possibly get. What do you see? What do you see when you got it up here? I know this is goofy. It's kind of silly. Just go with me. I hold it up to my eye and I can see blank. Now, do not say, I see nothing. That's boring. It might be you see nothing, but it's boring. We don't want to be boring. We're writers. Now, like I say, you can come back and fill in that blank if you haven't got the right thing yet. But for some reason, I had it up my eye. I hold it under my nose, take a big smell. It smells like blank. What does that object smell like? Now, you can easily say, it smells like metal. It smells like staples. All that might be true. But what might be a creative way to tell me what you smell? I smell blank. Now, figure out that smell, but at the same time, the next sentence is a little more complicated. There's something in creative writing we call the two-story anecdote. While we're writing about X, we might tell a quick two-sentence story about B, whatever it is. And here's how we do it. It's I got it under my nose. It smells like blank. The smell reminds me of blank. And here I want you to tell a two-sentence anecdote. It reminds me, that smell, it reminds me about that fair that me and Billy used to go to when we were kids. It reminds me of my grandmother on a cold day when she would play with staples. It reminds me of something. And that's a two-sentence story, an anecdote. All right? I'll give you a few minutes on that one. That one isn't going to be complicated, but you smart people, you know where this is going. And you don't want to go there, but what the heck? We're just making it up because remember, you got your object right here. So finally, I put it in my mouth. Whatever object you got, put it in your mouth. And I'm not going to do that right now because I have a real object. You're doing imagine, you're imagining an object. So imagine for some reason you put it in your mouth. It tastes like blank. What does that taste like? It tastes like, now you can be quick and easy. It tastes like garbage. You know, it tastes delicious. It tastes, but give it a thought. How would you describe that taste to a stranger? And when you get finished with the taste, your next sentence is the end. We're done. And now I'm looking for volunteers. Who among you might want to read what you just wrote? Read it out loud. Who might do that? Anybody? I'm sorry. Deb told me you guys were writers.
Yeah, go ahead, guys. Yeah.
And so don't be embarrassed at how silly what you wrote might be silly and it might sound stupid. But it's the first draft. We never let people see our first drafts except our friends and mentors and editors. So let's hear it. Somebody.
Mayuri, go ahead.
So the object that I chose was my water bottle. So, and I wrote, I'm sitting on the bed in my bedroom. I reach down and rub my hand on the bed. It feels steady, coarse, and certain. I stand up and walk over to my bottle of water. It is sitting next to my lip balm, which reminds me that this is something I need to pack for my trip next week. I pick up my bottle of water and throw it in the air. Thank God it was empty, or I wouldn't have been able to catch it. I press the bottle up against my ear and I hear the cool sensation of leftover water circling around the base of the bottle. I hold it up as close to my eye as possible, and the turquoise translucent casing calmed me. I hold it up to my nose, and it smells like my own breath. And that smell reminds me of the inside of my head when I'd catch a cold. I put it in my mouth and it tastes like cool air in a summer evening.
All right. What did you guys hear that you liked? One sentence. She wrote many sentences. Was there any sentence you liked? Anybody?
The description of the sound of the water bottle. I thought that was.
I like that a lot. She said, I hear the cool sensation. Right? I hear cool sensation. I like that one a lot. What else? Anybody else? What'd you hear in her piece? What'd you like? All right. Give me another volunteer. Read what you just wrote. Somebody. One more. Come on. Don't be shy. I'm 1,000 miles away. I'm in Chicago, United States.
Siyashi would go.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, go. Yeah, go ahead, please.
I'm sitting on an L-shaped sofa in my living room. I rub my hands on the gray material covering the sofa. Its coarseness baffles me. I assumed a smoother surface. I stand up and walk over to the transistor kept on the table in front of me. My transistor sits next to a family photograph taken on a trip to Jaipur. The photograph reminds me of the days the room was suffused with laughter. I pick up the transistor and I throw it up in the air. The transistor spins in the air and falls into the cup of my palms, perhaps fearing its demise were it to fall on the ground. I press the transistor up against my ear and hear a static buzz. I bring it close to my eyes, its small holes magnifying in front of me. I bring it close to my nose, a slightly rusted smell filling up my nostrils. The smell reminds me of my childhood,
when I shuffle through my toys placed in an iron cupboard. I put the transistor in my mouth and its taste reminds me of stale tears.
What was that last one? The taste? What is
Reminds
that
me
taste
of
from?
stale tears.
Excellent. Now, everybody, give me one sentence you liked. Just one.
I really like the last
I-
sentence.
The last sentence was really good. I liked the when she touched the when she was sitting on the coarseness baffles me. That was a good line. The coarseness baffles me. I did not like the sound of static buzz. That was okay. You know, that was an okay line, not a great line, not a really good one. It's okay, but I think it's a bit. You know, everybody expects to hear static from a transistor. What would they not expect to hear when you put it up to your ear? What would surprise them? Now you guys see what I'm doing is I made you walk through all your senses, how something feels and tastes and touch. Now, this is a silly exercise and you're never going to do this in a real story. But maybe you're writing a story in which you do sit down on a chair and your hand brushes up against it and the coarseness baffles me. One sentence. I hear the cool sensation of the water bottle, or something. You're interviewing somebody. You're doing a profile, and they're wearing a hat. They're wearing something on their head. The color reminded me of blank, and that blank is the secondary subject of you. We're writing about, in my silly example, I'm writing about a stapler. But you know, probably that's not going to sell. That story's not going to fly. But whatever you're writing about, you encounter stuff, objects, inanimate, not alive. Can you pause your story, stop time, and tell the reader something about that object? Now, it doesn't add anything because you're writing about, you know, the stapler, and you're not writing about the coffee cup or the cool sensation. But something happens to your story if you do this. The writing just goes up. It becomes better writing. Not the story. You got to be a reporter, a journalist. You got to get the story. It's got to be interesting to your reader. But can you make and move the writing up? Just a little bit. It might be just one sentence. It might be one time. You saw the Red Sky in the Morning piece. She is creative throughout. She's constantly bringing you colors and how they taste and how they feel. You may not have noticed that because you were reading about the big woman and kissing the young man, you know, and we're on a Greyhound bus going through, you know, the southern United States. And that's what the reader thinks they're reading. But they get small details of sensory experience. And the reason we like sensory experience is because our readers are human. We're not writing for dogs and cats. And our readers have the same senses we have. They know what things smell like, or taste, or touch. They don't know that object that you're describing. You're in a unique place. We're the writer. We get to go places that the reader can't go. The reason they read our stories is because we went somewhere they could not go. We interviewed someone, we talked to someone that they have never talked to. We meet people that our reader never met. Right? That's what they are reading. That's what draws them to the story. That's the only reason they're still reading. But as they're reading, they hear about something where the coarseness baffles me. They hear about something. I smell my own breath. I hear a static buzz. It's have a slight rusty smell. Reminds me of my childhood. It kind of just, you're distracting the reader. You're giving the reader stuff that has nothing to do with the story or the focus, but something happens with the reader because they know what smells like. They know what coarseness is. They may not know what a cool sensation sounds like, but it sounds really cool. It sounds nice. It sounds good. And they're just going to keep reading. They're going to go to the next sentence. They're going to read whatever you're writing. But something happens to your writing. It's elevated. You're entertaining your reader. You are not just a reporter, but a narrator. You're walking the reader through a story, and you need sensory details to get that across. Anybody else want to do one more? Anybody else want to read? Like I said, the way this would work in real life, you're working on a story, and you have an object in the story. It might be the pen you're holding, and you decide to, for some reason, to tell the reader what that pen feels like or smells like. You give them some sensory detail about that pen. Now, you might spend days on figuring out that smell, weeks. I don't know, if you're on deadline, you see, you can revise that sentence until it's almost magical, until it is the sentence you want. And then you move on. One of our most famous fiction writers here in the United States is Ernest Hemingway. And what he talks about when he was talking about writing, he says, good writing is one true sentence after another. You write one sentence and you work it, you revise it, you move stuff around, you change the vocabulary, you change the words, and now write the next sentence and you work on it, you change it, you write, and then write another sentence. It's not the story that makes it creative, it's the sentence. It's got to be a smart sentence. And so what you want to do is work on your sentences. You're working on the story. You know how to do interviews and get quotes and do secondary sources and do your research and, you know, to give the reader a full detailed story about something. You know how to do all that. The journalist has to wear two hats when you're doing feature writing. You got to be a reporter. That's just being the journalist. You wear that hat, you get the facts, you get the names, you spell everything right. But then once you got all your research done and you've done all your interviews, you take off your reporter hat and you become a writer. Now write the story. Don't just tell me about that moment, that event. Write it one sentence after another. And that's how you get the story Red Sky in the Morning. I don't know if you guys noticed, I found lots of beautiful sentences in that story. Just beautiful, well crafted. And you know, the writer, she might have spent weeks on that one sentence or several days, you know, what's the right way to say this? And she come up with that vocabulary, the stout and godlike and heaved and bulk that made us feel that woman. But since she's writing about telling stories, it changed. You guys saw the story change. One of my favorite lines in this piece it goes way down there near the bottom. Now she's talking about our readers. More than a story, we want a voice speaking softly, urgently in our ear. That's good advice for all of us. Think about it. More than a story, we want a voice speaking softly. Now, you guys know that, softly. And then all of a sudden, urgently in our ear. The voice is the voice of the writer. It's the narrator. It's the tone. It's the color. We like stories as human beings. We've been telling stories since our days living in the caves. You know, we draw pictures on the walls of the caves. The Egyptians and their hieroglyphics right? We've been telling stories as humans. We've been telling stories to each other forever. It is how we understand the world. Tell me a story. When we were kids, parents or teachers used to read us stories, and it helps us understand the world. We love stories. And what Patricia Ham was talking about, that what gets our attention is more than a story. We want a voice speaking softly, urgently in our ear. I just like those two words next to each other, softly and urgently. They sort of cancel each other out, but you see here how it sounds together. We want a voice speaking softly, urgently in our ear. And now I got a different image. I get a sense of somebody whispering in my ear. That's soft, whispering, but whispering with urgency. Think about that. How cool is that? It's just a really good line. And that's my trick, guys. Creative nonfiction. You want to write good sentences. Anybody got questions?
Guys, anybody has any questions? Yeah, Ron, thank you so much. It's been wonderful. And Suyash, Sarish, any questions?
Questions?
Yeah, so while we are crafting a narrative, I mean, like, is there any like thumb rule that we can think of, like, to help us, situate the whole thing?
Think about what? I
Like,
didn't quite catch it.
when we are, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. So when we are constructing a narrative, what are the things, as in, like, is there like a general thumb rule for it, like, that we should keep in mind?
There isn't,
Mhm.
except this. You got to remember that there are two subjects. Whatever you're writing about, that's what you stay focused on. But you've got to make sure that there's a sense of reflection by the author, by you. And that adds what I call the magic to a good story. There's magic in it because of that one sentence. When the reader hits that one sentence and you give them some observation or detail, they're gonna take note. They're gonna say, "Damn, that's an impressive sentence." You got to have both. And the other way to answer your question, of course, you guys know, it always depends. What's your deadline, and what publication are you writing for, so that you know something about the reader. You got to know something about them. If I'm using lots of colors in my piece, I'm assuming my reader knows those colors. I have to know that they know that. So it's always, and hopefully you guys know that now, everything we do is about the reader. I can't write about purple shoes. I can't write about purple shoes, and the people reading it, they all wear blue shoes. They don't have any interest in purple shoes. And so they're not going to read my story. They're going to be bored. So we're always focused on the reader. Once you have the reader identified and you have the length requirement, your editor says I need 500 words or I need 1,000 words. Once you have all that, then it's one sentence after another. Tell me a story. Remember being a kid. Tell me a story. I don't know how much time we got, Deb, but do you guys want to hear my execution story?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
We got time for this, Deb?
Yes, of course.
I was here in Chicago when a terrorist, an American terrorist, blew up a federal building and killed lots of people. When it came time for him, he was convicted and sentenced to death. There was court cases and stuff. It took about 10 years. But when it came time for him to be executed, everybody in that town wanted to watch the execution.
Timothy McVeigh?
This is Timothy McVeigh.
Yeah.
The last American terrorist to be executed here. And he killed a lot of people. And so all the relatives and everybody in that town, they wanted to go watch the execution. And they appealed, and the state decided to do closed circuit television so that thousands of people can watch. National Public Radio wasn't sure if that was a good thing. And they asked writers to submit pieces on that issue. Should Americans have public executions? That was the subject. And you'll notice that's not what I write about. Listen, years ago, or was it just the other day, I watched some man in uniform strap another man into a chair, attach wires to his body, and then send so much electricity through him that the smell of his burning skin drifted beneath his hooded mask and through the plexiglass that divided him from me. I was one of a dozen witnesses officially authorized by the state and my newspaper to write the final chapter in what had been one of the most sensational crimes in North Florida. About 10 years before, even before I graduated from school, a man robbed a store and, for reasons never explained at his trial, tortured the sales clerk, a single working mother, before killing her with a hunting knife. Newspapers, including the one that would hire me, had used the word grisly in 36-point banner headlines. I would guess most of the people who lived in that small town wanted to watch the execution. In a way, I was their representative. I was their eyes, and I carried their indignation with me right into the death chamber. I remember almost everything about the execution itself, the smell, the fear on both sides of the glass, the awful, awkward moment when the hood being pulled over the condemned man's face got hooked on his nose, someone struggling with a tight t-shirt. When the warden asked if he had any last words, he mumbled something and very clearly said, "I'm innocent. You're making a terrible mistake." He then offered his opinion about capital punishment with a one-word expletive that most newspapers, mine included, never mentioned. And then we sat there, we reporters and guards and politicians and a woman who did not give her name. We all sat there and watched him jerk violently in his chair like someone trying to move his hand back from the fire. And we kept on watching until he stopped jerking, until he stopped moving. And then someone drew a heavy curtain around him, and there was nothing else for us to watch. While I remember all this, the thing I remember most is the night before, in his cell on death row, when I asked him what he would want his gravestone to say. Though I had been handpicked by the state to record the final words of a condemned man, this was the only question I had for him. "What?" he said, looking at me with what I would later describe as a smirk. I repeated my question, just doing my job, working another story, getting the facts, writing it all down, keeping the public informed. But even though I would write down another 1,000 quotes in my newspaper career, this is the only one I can still recite. "I won't need no gravestone," he said, "because I'm not going to die." Like a good reporter, I wrote down his words, put them in my notepad so that they could be retrieved, used against him in the obituary I would indeed write the very next day. At the time, I didn't see the irony in his answer, in this loser with a capital L trying to deny his own fate, even though for him it had been written down and signed by the governor. "This is as far as you go, bub." But I think I understand it now. My cynicism worn down by 1,000 quotes, 1,000 stories. Still, it puzzles me, his answer to my question. Was he being brave in the face of his own death? Or was he simply being stupid by refusing to see the writing on the wall? For that one moment, justice was not the issue, nor was it vengeance or retribution or hatred. It was faith. I believe faith in something very human, despite some very inhumane surroundings. I don't have nightmares because of it, but it is a puzzle that I believe I will ponder, but never solve for the rest of my life. You see, I never mentioned Timothy McVeigh. I never talk about whether people should go see an execution. I told them a story about me seeing an execution. And what readers got out of that, I don't know. I told you, I got a lot of letters, but you see, there were two subjects. The subject was me remembering witnessing something horrible, but the other one was about something called faith and what we believe. That's the bigger subject. Two pieces. Hey, they published it. They paid me some money, right? We don't do this for fun. But that is what I would call creative nonfiction, guys. Tell me a story. Any questions?
Anyone? It's been wonderful, Ron. It's amazing. It's just took me the old days of our university days. You know, you remember I used to sneak into your class and.
Well, I used to sneak into yours and learn something about mobile journalism. This man's writing stories on his phone. I'm like, what? What?
Thank you so much.
I was impressed.
Yeah. So if you need that thing to be done for your students, and I'm more than happy to do that. You know, just.
Well, I'm going to call you up. Because I'm a newspaper man. I worked for years in newspaper and print. When I was working in newsrooms, there was no internet. There were no cell phones. So I'm a different generation of journalists. But I am a teacher, and my students are young, and they're going to be working in a digital world. So I've had to learn, Dev. I've had to adapt to the digital world, but I'm not an expert in it. Not like you. Dev is the man. He was following stories from all over the world on his phone.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time, you know, and apologies for getting that time.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah.
Thank you for inviting me, even though Dev got the time wrong.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you so much.
You bet. Good luck to everybody. Good luck with your writing.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Go on.
Bye.
Cheers.